Karen, the HOA president, and her neighbors set the scene in a suburban neighborhood governed by a strict HOA. Karen's background, explore Karen's motivations and personality traits, discuss her obsession with property values and neighborhood aesthetics. The conflict described the ongoing disputes between Karen and her neighbors over property lines and landscaping. Detail the tensions that have been building in the community. The incident. Narrate the night Karen decides to move the property line fence under the cover of darkness. Describe the method she uses and her justification for the action. The drone footage introduced the county surveyor who uses drones to monitor property lines. Detail how the surveyor discovers the altered fence in the footage. The aftermath describe the surveyor's reaction and the implications of the footage. Explore how the neighbors react when they learn about Karen's actions. Community meeting. Narrate a tense HOA meeting where the issue is discussed. Show various perspectives from the neighbors, some supporting and some opposing Karen. Legal consequences. Discuss potential legal actions that could arise from moving the fence. Detail Karen's responses and the community's feelings about the situation. Resolution. Explore how the community comes together, either to support or oppose Karen. Discuss the outcomes for Karen and her relationships with her neighbors. Conclusion. Reflect on the themes of community, integrity, and the impact of one person's actions on many. Brief introduction. In the quiet suburbs of Maplewood, where picket fences lined perfectly manicured lawns, peace was a fragile thing. Homeowners Association President Karen Thompson prided herself on maintaining the neighborhood's pristine image. Yet beneath her smiling facade lay an unyielding obsession with control. One fateful night, armed with determination and a sense of entitlement, Karen made a decision that would alter the fabric of her community. She stealthily moved her property line fence, encroaching on her neighbor's yard. Little did she know, her actions would not go unnoticed. The county surveyor, equipped with the latest drone technology, captured the entire event on video. As the footage circulated, tensions in Maplewood ignited. Neighbors who once smiled politely at each other found themselves divided. Accusations flew and alliances were tested. In a community where harmony had been the goal, Karen's bold move would lead to an unexpected confrontation, one that would forever change the dynamics of the neighborhood. HOA. Karen moved the property line fence overnight. The county surveyor caught it on drone footage. The fence line fiasco. The quiet suburban street of Willow Creek Estates was governed by two immutable forces: the unwritten laws of property lines and the written and frequently weaponized bylaws of the Homeowners Association, HOA, presided over by the formidable Brenda the Bulldozer Carr. Brenda, a woman who treated the HOA rulebook like a sacred text, had always had a simmering feud with her next-door neighbor, Mark Jensen. The conflict centered on a small strip of land bordering their backyards. For 20 years, a modest white picket fence had stood exactly where the original plat maps indicated, the legally recognized property line. Mark had always kept his side tidy, while Brenda, an avid and overly territorial gardener, always felt her prize-winning rose bushes were encroached upon by one too many of Mark's errant tomato stakes. One Tuesday morning, Mark stepped out for his coffee and stopped dead in his tracks. The fence was gone. In its place, about 3 feet into what Mark knew was his property, stood a brand-new, imposing, 6-foot-tall wooden privacy fence. It was perfectly positioned to entirely shade his afternoon patio and effectively wall off his shed. "That bitch," Mark muttered, the coffee instantly forgotten. Brenda had struck under the cover of darkness. She hadn't just suggested a boundary adjustment. She had executed a full-scale, overnight land grab, likely with a borrowed pickup and a couple of contractors she'd bullied into working under the table. Mark knew arguing with Brenda face-to-face was futile. She'd feign innocence, blame the old fence for rotting, and claim she was merely correcting a long-standing boundary ambiguity as per some obscure covenant. He needed hard evidence, and he knew exactly who had the best eyes in the county. Mark walked straight to the county surveyor's office. The office was quiet, save for the low hum of powerful computers running GIS software. He was greeted by Mr. Henderson, a man whose job was entirely about precision, GPS coordinates, and irrefutable facts. "Mr. Henderson," Mark said, placing his original property deed on the desk. "My neighbor, Brenda Carr, moved my property line fence last night. I need a new survey, but more importantly, I need proof of when the old one was there." Henderson, a man of meticulous habits, nodded slowly. "Fences moved overnight? That's ambitious. We can get a crew out, but surveys take time. However, we do have our routine aerial mapping program." He tapped a few keys on his monitor, bringing up a high-resolution, geo-referenced 3D map of Willow Creek Estates, updated bi-weekly. "We flew Sector Gamma. That's your neighborhood on Sunday afternoon." "Let's see." Henderson zoomed in on Mark's property. The screen displayed a crisp aerial image. There, clear as day, was the old white picket fence, sitting squarely on the original property line. He then navigated to the most recent dataset, captured just this morning, Wednesday. "Look here, Mark," Henderson said, pointing to the new spot. "This fence is clearly on your side." He then toggled a comparison view. The software overlaid the Sunday image onto the Wednesday image, highlighting the difference in red. The area where the new fence now stood was a vibrant, undeniable red. "That's 8 inches of land, Mark, and the shadow where the old fence was is right here." "That's incredible," Mark breathed. "It is," Henderson agreed, a rare, small smile touching his lips. "But the real kicker? Our high-resolution mapping often captures more than just static objects. We run thermal imaging sometimes, too. Let me check the supplemental data from the drone flight this morning." He pulled up the drone footage playback. The drone had been charting storm drainage a block over, but the flight path cut directly over the properties just after dawn. The footage was crystal clear. The drone camera panned over the backyards. The new wooden fence was prominent. Then the drone dipped slightly and the camera caught a brief but damning sequence. Brenda Carr, dressed in gardening gloves and sweatpants, nervously directing 2 men who were quickly hammering the final posts of the tall privacy fence into the ground. She glanced up at the sound of the drone, a look of pure panic crossing her face before she waved frantically for the men to hurry. Mark stared at the screen, dumbfounded. "She actually did it herself?" Henderson leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "She didn't just move it, Mark. She was caught in the act on a government-sanctioned, time-stamped, geolocated survey drone recording. We don't deal in hearsay here. We deal in facts. And facts are now stored in a database Brenda Carr can't intimidate." Within hours, the county surveyor's office, armed with the official survey documents, the side-by-side comparison maps, and the damning drone video showing the HOA president herself committing the alleged trespass and boundary alteration, had served Brenda Carr with a formal cease and desist order and a mandate to immediately remove the illegal structure and pay for a full, professional survey of her own property to reestablish her legal boundary. The next day, the imposing wooden fence was gone. In its place stood a very sad, slightly weathered white picket fence, situated exactly where it should have been. Brenda Carr didn't speak to Mark for the rest of the season. The only sound echoing in Willow Creek Estates was the gentle whirring of the county surveyor's drone, quietly patrolling the neighborhood, ensuring that every fence, every tree, and every single property line stayed exactly where the maps and the sky said it belonged. The HOA president had finally been measured, and she came up short. "My name's Ethan Brooks, and for the last 10 years, I've lived peacefully on the same quiet suburban street." That peace ended the day HOA Karen moved in next door. Karen wasn't just a neighbor, she was a nightmare in pearls, loud, entitled, and always clutching a clipboard. She believed her vision for the neighborhood mattered more than anyone else's rights. It all started with a fence. I had just finished rebuilding my backyard. Fence, a clean cedar barrier that sat exactly on my property line as verified by the county. But one morning, I walked outside to find something shocking. My fence had been moved, about 2 feet inward. At first, I thought I was seeing things. But when I checked my property stakes, it was undeniable. Karen had moved my fence overnight. The confrontation, I knocked on her door. "Karen, did you touch my fence?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, Ethan, I just realigned it. The HOA map says that land belongs to me. I'm just correcting a mistake." A mistake? That mistake was 2 feet of my yard, where I had buried sprinklers, planted shrubs, and built a small stone path. When I called the HOA to complain, guess who answered the phone? Karen. She was on the board. She dismissed my complaint, saying the HOA approved the boundary correction. That's when I decided to fight back, by the book. The drone evidence, I contacted the county surveyor's office. A friendly guy named Mark came out with his team. He looked at the situation and shook his head. "People move fences all the time," he said. "But if she did it without approval, that's propane. Did it without approval, that's propane.